And that will put the estimated cost per linear foot at $2,500. This is the table that contains all the cost breakdowns for each scheme. Again, the total cost of the basic road is $3,524,000. The estimated cost of the boulevard is $4,295,000, and the estimated cost of the boulevard with green stormwater infrastructure, $5,154,000. And the range of the cost per linear foot is from $1,700 at the basic road to $2,500 at the boulevard with green stormwater infrastructure. These are the projected infrastructure funding sources based on the 6-year transportation improvement plan by the City of Maple Valley. Some of the different sources include real estate excise tax, which is a tax on property owners when they sell their property, transportation impact fee, which is a fee that goes to new development projects that's supposed to pay for capital improvements. Transportation benefit district, which Maple Valley has one, that's a fee that goes to registered vehicle owners. They pay an annual fee, and that is to fund transportation improvements within cities. Grants, stormwater management fund, which is taxes on property owners that help pay for stormwater infrastructure and other taxes. So the real estate excise tax was 15%. The transportation impact fee was 28%. The transportation benefit district was 5%. Grants contributed 41%. Stormwater management fund was 9%. No private money, and other taxes contributed 2%. I should note that we got all these figures, again, from the 2019 6-year transportation improvement plan, and we averaged out all the different sources of funding.
Okay, and so with that, I'm going to discuss our general research pertaining to potential infrastructure funding sources on a federal, state, and lastly a local level. And so we started from a top-down higher view at the federal level, looking to see what sources of funding could potentially be available there. And what we learned was that federal typically tends to be mainly allocated to federal highways and transit projects. The Highway Trust Fund is a gasoline tax that has been the historical primary source of federal funding in terms of infrastructure projects. And as this tax rate has remained stagnant, it has not changed since 1993, there is a predictable funding shortage. And even though there was a large infrastructure bill that was passed in 2015, it is still projected that these funds will fall short. And so with that knowledge, we started to investigate on a more state level where we thought there would be more feasible avenues to fund this sort of infrastructure project. And so we investigated the Washington State Department of Commerce to begin with, and two really interesting programs that stood out to us was first the Public Works Board and Construction Loan Program. And so this provides low interest loans for local governments, focusing on public infrastructure construction and rehabilitation projects. And to be eligible for these loans, a project has to be focusing on improving public health and safety, responding to environmental issues, promote economic development, or upgrade system performances. And you could argue that the Maple Valley Legacy Site has the potential to do not just one of these items, but all of them, especially if you're looking at incorporating something like green stormwater infrastructure elements to the street. And so while that may be the more expensive option, it also opens up the project for more potential funding. And so similarly, there's also the Community Economic Revitalization Board, or CERB for short. And this is focusing more on economic development via job creation, partnering with local governments. And so with the Maple Valley Legacy Site, if you're bringing in education, local commerce, if you're providing a source of local employment, that could very much encourage new private business development and expansion, which is one of the requirements to be eligible for this pool of funding. And so we thought that both of these merited being highlighted as really viable sources for Maple Valley, the city of Maple Valley, to investigate to fund the phase 1 of the site infrastructure. And so diving in further to additional state funding sources, we looked at the Washington State Transportation Improvement Board, which is an independent state agency that was created to manage and distribute street construction and maintenance grants. In particular, the urban program here serves cities with a population of 5,000 or higher and also unincorporated areas. They issue a call for projects each June with a project selection happening every November. And so Maple Valley would fall into this urban programs category. There are also a number of resources that TIB provides, and we provided the hyperlink in the presentation, which will be available on the Maple Valley website after this, so that could be a really interesting thing for the city to investigate. And so kind of a subset of TIB is a new program called the Complete Streets Award. And so this is a funding specifically designed to benefit cities that have adopted complete street ordinances, and those that being cities that are designing infrastructure that accommodates all users. So not just motorized vehicles, but pedestrians, cyclists, transit users, so on and so forth. And as of May 2018, Maple Valley has enacted a complete streets ordinance. So this is a really exciting new funding opportunity, and funding cycle opens in July and then is due in December. And then so this table just kind of gives you a basic layout of generalized funding that's available and approved for use in Washington State, as well as on a local regional level. And so municipal bonds, which can be general obligation bonds as well as revenue bonds, special fuel tax, special sales tax, and vehicle registration fees. And as you've probably gleaned from the presentation so far, some of these elements are already being used both in Washington State and more locally as well. And so we then investigated the city of Covington Lake Point Urban Village development. They are working on the construction of a brand new roadway through this site, which they're calling the Covington Connector. And it has 2 phases. The initial phase would be modifications to existing infrastructure, but then they're also creating an entirely new roadway. And they were able to secure $24 million in funding from Connecting Washington, which is a WASDOT program. And it's a 16-year program, which again is funded by a gasoline tax increase that was fully phased in July of 2016. And then they're looking at additional funding sources via development fees. And so as this is your neighbor, essentially, it's a great example of how a project like this can be funded by means beyond the city. And then we wanted to bring it back a little bit to the 2016 Maple Valley Legacy Site Task Force. This was a timeline that was presented in that group. I believe August was when the presentation occurred. And so this just kind of mirrors our thought that phase 1, which we've mostly been discussing today, addressing the construction of the main street, is most likely to be publicly funded on the state or local level. And then phase 2, which is further down along here, is going to be the opportunity during which secondary roadways are being constructed and the development of each specific parcel is happening. That would be a very opportune moment to explore public-private partnerships in the future. And so with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Grace to summarize.
Yeah, so in the immediate future, the next step might be exploring more public funding sources as a primary option for phase 1. But moving forward, putting out an RFP, a request for proposal, to maybe find some more public and private partnerships to get this project moving and get it off its feet.
So I assume that the total cost is based on the length of the recommended road route that the Legacy Site Task Force came up with?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we can go back to.
Okay.
That's that route right there is the same one that was proposed by the task force, as well as what Manny and Justin used for their
Okay.
costing.
Thank you.
So one of the ways that the city of Maple Valley could look at this is to divide that total cost, let's say it's $2.5–3 million, by the net number of developable acres. So that's what a typical real estate developer would do. We weren't asked to do that, but you can figure out that if the net of the 50 acres is 32 or 36, whatever, that it's way less than $100,000 an acre to pay for that road. By the metrics of Western Washington Real Estate Development 2018, that's a bargain. So it would not seem to me as a developer that the cost of this road per se is an obstacle to opening the site to development. In many places it is, but I would suggest to you that this is not. Now, obviously, it doesn't include the lengthy and complicated and costly process of installing a light on the Washington State Highway across from the elementary school, which was the recommendation of all of our previous work. Because you're just not going to drive down that road at 60 miles an hour and make a left-hand turn or right-hand turn. But that wasn't our assignment for this quarter. I would assume that somebody in the city is going to undertake that study, because that's 2 or 3 years of work.
We're currently investigating that right now, and the initial plan is to have initial discussions with WashDOT about doing a roundabout. WashDOT is getting out of the business of doing signalized intersections on state highways. If you've driven Highway 2 up by Monroe, there's quite a few roundabouts that have replaced stoplights and increased the productivity of the state highway in those areas.
A roundabout is even better.
And cheaper, a lot
Right.
of the times.
But nonetheless, it's really good that you're working on that with them, because somebody has got to get the traffic off of that high-speed road into the site.
The bad part is that because we have to deal with WashDOT, it usually takes a couple of years just to go through the study process to do what's called a warrant analysis
Correct.
to determine whether the roundabout or signalization is the best option. So
But either by pure luck or sort of the way it lays out, a roundabout there would be perfect to access the site even in the 3 to 5 year time horizon, while you're finding private sector developer interest in the rest of the parcels.
Any other questions?
can you go back to the slide where you had the cost analysis for the 70-foot road? Let's back to, okay. So the biofiltration strips at 9 feet width at 2,100 linear feet on both sides, so that'd be 4,200 feet. Does that number seem a little short? The $12,000?
I think you're missing a digit.
I think you're probably right.
It can't be
I-
12 if the number above it. Yeah,
So maybe just double check that before publishing the final number. That's
Right.
one small recommendation.
And a good one.
Yeah, thank you for catching
and if
that.
you go forward, Chris, got to the summary slide. So if you look across the totals of 3.5, 4.2, and 5.1, that seems quite reasonable, given the design differential between the low, the medium, and the high. And none of those are scary numbers.
And the biggest cost savings we see right away is the the city owns the right of way, because that's where we have to give up a lot of funds in acquiring right of way. It's usually about $11 to $13 per square foot. to
But
acquire.
with all due respect, you've already spent the taxpayers' money to buy this property.
That's a very good point.
So it's a bit disingenuous to say,
Zero.
oh, look at all we saved. It looks good on paper, doesn't it?
Well, the good thing is that's gonna be $2,002 too, not $2,018.
Right, that's true.
Well, there you go.
But again, if you divide this total cost, even the higher priced car, by the number of acre, you have done a very good job in finding property that you can access for a $5 million cost.
Can you go to the screen where you broke down where the funds are gonna come from?
No back.
The table,
Yeah, the
based
ta-
on the Maple
the
Valley
table.
Transportation Plan.
Yeah, the
Just a couple
percentages
back.
and stuff like that.
Back,
There, that one. The transportation impact fee is right now used to fund the overlay project. So that money is already obligated.
Oh, look at this.
And the real estate excise tax, the way I understand it, is a developer pays that as part of their building permit, which means that the city is going to have to be the one doing it. That 15% is going to be on the city. So right away, we've lost a significant amount of money.
No, that's not correct.
No?
The
This is-
15% would come from the development of the parcels
Right.
as you sell or lease the land to developers.
But we're not gonna have that, we're putting the road in. So that, until somebody comes to develop it. So this is not money that's going to be available to pay
Right, the beginning.
the $5 million to build the road, or the $3 million.
Assuming you're paying for all this yourself now, that
Yeah.
private mitigate that says not applicable, if you're waiting until you do the roundabout and working up some public-private partnerships and some interest in the parcels, then all of a sudden you might find that the majority, as David says, or a good portion of it could be coming from sort of private, public-private partnership benefits and monies that aren't shown here. So this is just strictly the percentages based off of the, as it says, the 6-year transportation plan that you use in Maple Valley. So it hasn't been modified to reflect any unique arrangements or structures that could be developed as part of this project.
So the impact fee is gonna be the significant one at that stage of the game. But the fact of the matter is that those two elements are not going to be available to the city to fund the cost of putting that street in, which is intended to encourage developers to come in and develop.
But if you went back to the June 2018 financial summary, the total infrastructure price that we gave you was significantly higher than this $5 million, and the project pro forma still worked. So you're still well in the black, so to speak, for this project. If this had come in at $15 million, that's a problem. But this is still relatively inexpensive based on the 30 plus minus acre yield that you'll get out of 51 acres in total.
Will you correct the numbers on the bioswale and put that extra zero in and recalculate those monies for us?
Definitely,
Yeah.
in the final presentation,
Yeah.
all of that would be edited.
Councilmember Johnson, I think that one thing that we should consider is that the real estate excise tax and impact fees are monies that we would collect throughout this process. So if we did a councilmatic bond for $5 million, that's not
Exactly.
something we're obligated to pay cash up front.
Okay.
So we would be getting the money incrementally over time.
Okay, yeah, there's,
I mean, we could pay cash
So-
up front if we had the cash to pay up front.
So it's essentially a timing issue?
Yes.
yes, it's all timing.
And it's a 2 to 3 year lead, as Matt very well said, in just negotiating with WashDOT. You certainly wouldn't design and build a road that had no access.
Right.
So it's cart and horse, right? You start with WashDOT, maybe they give you some preliminary design engineering feasibility money. You spend that, you figure out the roundabout. While you're doing that, you do exactly what Tim just said, which is quite smart, of bonding the cost you start drawing down the principal of the bonds as you let the project to construction. It's just the timing of the cash flow.
If we were gonna go ahead with this project, which would come first, the roundabout or the street on the legacy side?
Definitely the roundabout. 'cause
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
get the
You have to
roundabout-
grab
Mhm.
access.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Or jointly, concurrently,
Yeah.
would be ideal, just.
it would be
Yeah,
ideal,
that would be
but.
ideal.
But the roundabout a little before the
Well,
road.
but the state isn't ignorant, they're
No,
not gonna
women like
give
to
you
spend money.
a green light to do a roundabout if it doesn't connect to a road.
Right.
Right now, it connects to squirrels, so they're not, it's perfect timing. You get the roundabout approval when you show them what you're gonna do when you have a roundabout.
Right.
And sorry, to back up a little bit, could we get your name just so we have context of
Oh, Linda Johnson,
Lennon Johnson?
I'm on city council.
Great.
Oh, great.
And then what was?
Jonathan Miller, I'm on the Legacy Site Task Force.
Right.
Could we go to, on the boulevard with the stormwater infrastructure, the pictures, layout,
This one here?
nope, let's go to the actual pictures.
Oh, the
Examples.
water infrastructure?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that one right
we
there.
go.
All right, so I look at it and then I start to think down the road, what's our maintenance costs for this? And, you know, we've had the discussions about the right type of shrubberies to plant, for lack of a better term right now, trees. And maybe, Matt, you know better, how do you know, building is one thing, maintaining it is another.
Well,
I would hate to put something in and then in a year it looks like a weed patch.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Grace?
Yeah, actually, the entire idea around doing green stormwater infrastructure is that you're putting in native plants to the area. So your first year is probably actually going to be your the year that you need most maintenance, because once that environment gets going, it supports itself. Though in heavy summer or very dry summers, there may be some maintenance. You may need to water the plants in order to make them survive through the summer. But essentially, these plants are they are made to infiltrate the bioswale, is what it's called, which is used at the bottom of most rain gardens' bioswales. And it creates its own environmental like ecosystem within there. Those plants are going to maintain themselves. There could be other maintenance costs in your solid structures, but the actual maintenance of your medians that are bioswales are going to be a lot less than any kind of traditional, well, even a traditional median that just has trees and bark chips.
And I would just add that most of these plants that are used in green stormwater infrastructure are hardy plants that really can withstand a whole summer without watering and not die off. To the maintenance of keeping them at the same level, most of these are designed, or just you plant the kind of plants that don't grow much larger than this. Sometimes the tops get a little high and you drive your trimmer down the road like you would with any other sort of city shrubbery, but they're extremely low maintenance actually, just the opposite of high maintenance.
And one other consideration is that if stormwater is not treated in this fashion and we go a more traditional route, then we're talking about stormwater ponds, maintenance vaults. There's other costs associated with that type of typical or traditional stormwater maintenance.
Okay, so could you put in your final present, version of this, a little bit more descriptive factor of what that means, or a statement that says, this is when you say, like the GSI, what it means when, what type of plants, whatever,
Sure.
exactly what you said. Because that will become a question
Okay,
later on,
definitely.
especially, I have it, I know others will have it too.
Tell her your name so she knows you.
And I'm Sid Dawson.
He's on city council too.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Did you look at Rock Creek Meadows, because they have a boulevard lane and they have a planter strip that's a bioswale, and it's not nearly that wide.
This is a very extreme example.
Yeah,
Really,
this, we're
that
not
looks
sugge-
dangerous to me.
I mean, this is, the center one, the stormwater median, is used more, for more than just a bioswale. That one is, almost like a
Like a river going
conveyance,
through it.
yeah,
Right.
conveyance system. Did you have more on that?
Well, I just wondered why it needed to be so big, and,
It doesn't.
and,
It doesn't.
and what we have, I think, is very attractive. The issue for him is that in Rock Creek Meadows, what we have, it's the HOA that's responsible for the operation and
Gotcha.
maintenance, of it,
Well,
aren't they?
you raise a very good point. Since the city owns the entirety of the site,
Yeah,
you should be creative in figuring out, don't just sell these parcels and let every individual owner developer do what they want. That's why you have strip malls. Figure out a way to collectively write covenants. You have a city attorney, they know how to do this, so that there is an assessment function. You can recapture financially the cost of operating this infrastructure. It's done everywhere that there's public asset. And until you sell or lease the last square inch, you control this property. So you have a perfect opportunity to manage the financial cost of operating this at no cost to the city.
one more, can you go back to one of the diagrams of the street widths? Okay, any of them is fine, but go back one more. Okay, that one is fine. I went to the AWC conference this last June, and there was a segment that I attended on street trees. And the arborist for the state of Washington did a really nice job of his presentation. And one of the problems I think we're going to see in Maple Valley this spring is a lot of dead trees. Because he says that it's very bad for trees and for the city to plant trees in a cement sidewalk next to a street with buildings on the other side, because there's no place for the roots to go. So here, that's exactly what we're doing. So one of the things I'm pushing for is the planning commission to start taking a look at that, and I think we need to change the tree standards.
Sure.
And it might be worth your while, just as an education factor, to look into that a little bit more.
Yeah, doing more sort of just like bioswales without the trees. I put in trees.
Well, because that's the way everybody's building.
Right, that's a traditional, that's what you do, you put the cookie cutter tree on the side. I actually put the trees in there because when I came to Maple Valley the first time, the first thing I noticed was all of your trees. You guys are so blessed with so many amazing big trees, especially looking at the library and how they've incorporated trees into their parking lots, and it's surrounded.
But those were existing, we didn't plant
Right,
those, all of
right,
these were
so-
planting.
Yeah, that would be interesting to look at. And also, another thing to consider is that these buildings are completely made up by my own design.
But that's the way we're building them in
Right,
Maple Valley
right.
too, so,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so maybe even a fourth option of doing a more non-traditional street design with GSI, and maybe consider
Put the trees down,
trees that
down
are
the center.
actually trees in the center, or
Yeah.
No
trees
trees.
that are better suited, or plants in general that are better suited.
Right.
For,
I think Spokane
Pavement
does a
road.
pretty decent job of that, especially in the old part. It's a lot wider than that, it's
Mhm.
probably 3 times that wide, they're huge. They're almost like a park, but
You
they've
gotta
got the
bring-
trees down the center,
Mhm.
and they've got a lot more area for them to
Right.
grow and
Yeah.
survive.
And that's like a traditional boulevard where you
Yeah.
have a median and
And I'm
a
really
whole tree down the
concerned what
center.
we're gonna find
Right.
next year when the
But
trees start,
the idea, just really quickly,
because I think we've got way lot of dead trees.
so, but the idea with this design, with the green stormwater infrastructure is you would put in trees, these are just illustrative,
Yeah.
but you would put in trees that whose root structure wouldn't be any larger than, say, your 4.5 foot planting strip, which is going to be open. There's not going to be sidewalk there. Now there'll be
See,
sidewalk on the other side, Now, it's important to make sure that those trees in 20 years, their roots aren't gonna get so large.
But
that
the
they start
challenge
buckling the
is, what are
sidewalk.
those maple trees gonna look like in 20 years? Because they're not the kind of tree you're describing, they're gonna be huge.
But you don't put those trees in, that's what I'm saying. You put the
Yeah.
kind in that aren't going to grow roots like that,
Yeah.
that will work with the green stormwater infrastructure, so, yeah.
The other caveat is go back to the original first page. When you look at this road basically, go back all the way to the site.
Oh, this one.
This road is a road to nowhere. So you're not going to build this road with the expectation that people are gonna leave a high-speed road and cut through in order to save time. They're gonna lose time doing this. So we have to be very careful in the design of this road not to overbuild the road. Second of all, in economic theory, which is what I think about all day long, is every square foot that you build is a square foot you can't sell or lease. So it's very nice to get all greened up. You got a lot of trees on the site to begin with. You've got to be careful not to overinvest in this as a piece of infrastructure. Because you can see it's not connected, and it won't ever be connected.
Right.
And that's a good thing.
Can you go to the one?
Well, it could eventually be connected. There is right of way immediately to the south of that
Right.
southern entrance.
That's, and we sorry to interrupt, we lined up this diagram with that street and this street, so that way it does provide.
But go back to the little map that you have of the design, the build-out, the potential placement was real colorful.
Potential placement of,
They don't have that in this PowerPoint.
Yeah, it was on
you
there.
mean the very end?
Was it
But
at the
it's
very?
the other
No,
project.
no, with the bubbles, the development bubbles.
No,
The one by the task force.
No, go to the project in the next town.
Yeah.
Oh.
that's what I
Oh,
thought.
that was city of
Yeah, they're
Covington.
really colorful.
oh, I'm sorry, you're right.
Yeah, so that's
But-
how they mapped out.
Okay,
like,
but,
right.
There's
but
a
ours
little
is
bit.
not gonna be that much different than that, except the, the shape and everything. But
Right,
it's going to, eventually it would have streets coming out to it
Right.
as the rest of the property developed. So it isn't just going to be a street that's there and no other streets accessing it.
Correct.
Within the site, that's correct.
within the site like this one, yes.
But it doesn't traverse to
Yeah,
somewhere else other than this southern right-of-way.
Right. The primary connection in and out of
Yeah.
the site is only at those primary locations where there's already a street adjacent and adjacent to the site there and there.
but there will be streets coming into it.
Yes, within the site.
Okay.
yes.
Right, so
Yeah.
there would be, streets coming off of it going to development here. This is merely, to keep things simplified, we are only focusing on the road, we're not focused on any conceptual development of the parcels and the streets that would.
Okay, so then, back to the comment that you made. Since we're putting this street in as an attempt at economic development, and we know that eventually there's gonna be other build-out and coming into it, do we wanna do it the narrow, least expensive way, and then in 10 years, as it's building out, wish that we'd made it wider, or do we?
Well, the basic theory is you want to capture the economic value of these 50 acres. You're not trying to capture contiguous property. So
No,
oftentimes,
just those, yeah.
right, well, oftentimes in real estate development, you would be trying to capture parcels contiguous to the street. But in this case, remember that the development plan that we showed you last June is mostly all the development here because this is the protected area.
Yeah, but do we need a boulevard street
So,
to enhance or
So that-
complement the streets that are eventually?
so that's the
coming
next
in?
level of detail. So what we do is we take a conceptual plan, we then figure out what the traffic loading is from all the 5 different ways this could be built out in retail and residential and office. And then we run algorithms to figure out how wide that conceptual street should be. We're not doing that this quarter.
No.
But that's what traffic engineering is. It also has to
Scott's
be
got his
done
work cut out for him.
to convince the state of Washington as to how to build this roundabout, because their warrants are not issued unless there's a certain level of benefit from the public investment in either a roundabout or a traffic light. So if you had just a bunch of bird watching and 5 guys on a weekend coming in here, you're never going to get a roundabout or a traffic light or anything. Why should they do that? But our development plan that we gave you last June showed some pretty robust development.
Yeah.
That would support, hopefully, to meet the minimum standards that the State of Washington Department of Transportation imposes on the permission to build a roundabout. Remember, they're interested in traffic flow. A roundabout has to have a purpose. This development is the purpose. The road here is not the purpose. The road accesses the development.
Well, there's also a school on the opposite side of that.
Yes, but so far, the school's still there and it's working without a roundabout.
Sure.
But
It
a
would
roundabout does provide
Yeah.
natural calming and slowing
Yeah.
of the traffic, so.
Which is a negative when you're a traffic engineer, it's not a positive.
Right, but it's a positive for safety and, and also it provides without any infrastructure, the slowing of traffic.
Right,
in-
but it's all about who wins, that's America. So in order for the city of Maple Valley to win, they have to convince the state of the purposefulness
Right.
of investing this to slow down traffic to allow this development.
Right.
The state
To
does
get
not
into the
own
site.
this property.
Yeah.
The city owns this property.
And that's the important consideration that David had stated early on, is that the state is not invested in
That's
helping
correct.
us.
In
They
helping
want-
the property,
They
no.
want traffic to be moving at 45 miles an hour.
That's correct. And part of learning as a student is why things get built that way in the United States is exactly what you just said. Who is really the initiator? It's the city, not the state. And even if the state funds a roundabout, it's only because there's some public benefit. And who is the beneficiary? The city of Maple Valley.
Right,
In fact, I would argue that the WashDOT engineers in Olympia could care less.
right.
You can see that's what they do, they just build roads. Well, now they don't. Right, there's no more money, 'cause,
And the ones they have, some of them they've screwed up pretty bad.
Right, exactly.
Well,
So we don't wanna do that on this road.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So
we
look
don't.
at that.
A couple of things, I know if the road were connected to the south, early on, I could see it becoming a shortcut. The people would take it down to get over to, Cage Ridge. And, from a conversation I had with a different traffic professor, he was saying, the wider the road, the faster people will drive on it. So it seems to me we wanna design it to wide enough, but not really crazy wide,
Right.
where people would drive extremely fast on it. If you have a parking strip on the side that looks kind of like lane, it's really wide, you'll get people driving faster and faster through there, which is the last thing we want, is people
But the
doing
interesting-
50 on that
The
road.
interesting thing here is the people that determine this road design and how the site is used is the city of Maple
Right,
Valley.
right,
It's
absolutely.
not a typical private development,
Right.
right? So you can decide, all things being equal, which they never are, how do you make sure this benefits the city of Maple Valley?
It's
The
kind of a
first
balance.
consideration is safety, the second consideration is how to pay for it, and the other consideration is how do we maximize our economic return from the development of the acreage? If you have a road that's not big enough, you'll never sell or lease the parcels.
Right.
Because the developers will come and say, what are you guys, crazy? You got a bike path here, this is
Right.
ridiculous.
Right.
I can't get any retail customers.
Right.
So somewhere in all of that yet to be conversation, this will get sorted out. But it's under your control, which is a very unique situation and a very good situation.
And to your point, this is only a 2-lane road.
Right.
It's a 2-lane road with whatever the amenities you feel are necessary to attract development to the site, which is, to your point, Councilmember Johnson, right? That's why it's important, you build a road once, right? So it's better to build it out to the maximum width that you're going to need to attract development and all the amenities to make this a place to be, a place to come to, a place adjacent to the lake across from this site here. Out of the scope of this particular proposal, I mean, I could see very easily development which somehow provides access through this part of the property, where there'll be a barrier of natural area around the majority of this property here, having access to the lake, that could become part of that public benefit.
But we already have 5 different flavors of the developments.
Right.
Okay. Remember also that it's not just cars. All the utilities and all the telecommunications
Right.
don't happen without this road. So the road is the whole infrastructure spine to get the development to happen.
And it maximizes it just maximizes utilization of the site in terms of, it breaks it up almost exactly in half in terms of acreage.
Hey, for the road construction costs, this is for Justin and Manny, did that assume, like David said, the utility infrastructure costs such as water and sewer?
Yes.
It's a modern road, yes.
Okay. So it's all inclusive?
Which is great, because when we gave you last June a $9 million estimated cost, which we didn't have the expertise of these people, now it's in the 3 to 5 range. You're really in the black with regard to, okay, we're less than $100,000 net to get this property going. Now that's well under market metrics, we can begin to think about who comes in here. Even if we start along the road, as you very well suggested, in a short-term lease for a farmer's market, or some pop-up something. Well, you still have to have some road going on, because you gotta get traffic off the road. So it all makes sense by the mathematics of the cost. I was very worried until they did this work, that we didn't know last June it would be this reasonable.
When you say water and sewer, are you talking, what do you, I
Full
understand the
utilities.
sewer part.
A road that's ready to serve
Correct.
businesses and any other uses on that site.
Correct.
Okay.
So power, water, sewer, the area for cable, if necessary.
It's all the
Okay,
telecommunications.
so all the utilities
All
included,
utilities.
all right.
There's a quick,
Thank you. I'm Erin Reed from the City Council as well. Has there been an analysis, and I don't know if we've had enough time pass by over the last decade or so, since we have green infrastructure systems that we can put in, we have, I know more and more cities are probably doing LEED certification, which is, I don't even know if that's around still.
For buildings,
Yeah, for buildings. So has there been an assessment or evaluation of, over the span of 20 to 30 to 50 years, the cost of benefit analysis of putting in much more green natural infrastructure and stormwater retention as opposed to the cost of retention ponds or vaults? Does it eventually pay off, and is it a better bang for your buck to do the green development as opposed to the more traditional vaults, underwater channels, etc., or underground channels?
Absolutely. We did not do that analysis, but there is loads of evidence and
Okay, so
research out
clean
there
information about
that supports exactly that conclusion, that yes, not only is it more cost effective now, but especially it's more cost effective in the future. There's less operations and maintenance. There's less actual need for infrastructure repair down the road, and it's much more accessible than having to then, in 50 years, dig up the pipes because your infrastructure is crumbling. So, yeah.
I
But-
think additionally, on top of the monetary benefits and savings that you have now, by doing green stormwater infrastructure, there's a lot of ecological benefits to that side as well. You're creating green space for your environment, and this is going to be a lot of land's going to be developed. But increasing the amount of ecosystem space that you have in the area is going to be better in the long run for your ecosystem services and how your ecosystem within this large area of development is going to function. That trickles down and spreads and connects to all different things. So there's a lot of monetary but also non-monetary benefits too.
But the only way to make sure that happens is if the developable portion of the site is done to these green standards.
Right.
The road itself is almost meaningless because it's a very, very small percentage of the impervious surface to be built on the site. What's most important is if this is a green standard, then the physical development that you impose on the developers is at or above the standards that you did for the road.
Right.
And that's really important for your planning department, your building department, public works to constantly keep in mind.
My understanding is that developers are already going that route anyways.
Not-
Many
well-
of them are already saying, this is gonna be more cost effective, it's more aesthetically pleasing, so they're, but, I mean, not to say the city doesn't need to have that requirement. But I just think, my understanding was more and more doing it.
Well, if it were, this road, all due respect, wouldn't look the way it looks. So it's not just what they want, it's what the banks will lend. Remember, it's capitalism, right? So you go to Mr. Banker with his MBA, he's like, I don't do trees. Your return on my loan, your metrics don't work. Well, yes, they do. You don't want to hear it, so we're going to go to a different bank, and that is changing. But it is still better for the regulators, the city of Maple Valley, who own the ground, that when you sell these parcels, that you impose on their developers reasonable standards which they can easily meet, which are financeable by a lender, so that the whole thing falls within this goal of a green development.
Right.
It can't be this guy did it and this guy didn't do it.
Right.
Right. You
Because
set
that's
the
what
standard.
America is. You see it everywhere in this country.
So, one of the really good things that we have going for us here in Maple Valley that will dictate a lot of what we do here is that we've got tremendous soil. So this, all the infiltration analysis will be most likely, I mean, could not be the case, but it's probably gonna pass with flying colors. So what's gonna govern all of this development anyway is the DOE standards. So that's, as a developer, you follow those standards anyway. So it's gonna happen, and it can be cost effective, it can be well done, but it has to pass the test first. So if it infiltrates, it's gonna pass. And in this
However-
case, it will. We've got great tip.
Right, but DOE is the state of Washington. What I do on a lot here is governed by the zoning and the rules to some degree
Yeah, no,
of the city of Maple
It
Valley.
has to be built to DOE, that's it.
Okay,
No
but
doubt.
the percentage of lot coverage, the setbacks, the impervious coverage, last time I looked, is a local regulation.
Sure, impervious and all that, but the way you treat the water and the way it's handled is, now they've changed it. So it used to be a choice. You could go in and say, well, let's find out if infiltration works. Now they changed the code.
Right.
And you have to do infiltration if it
Sure.
works.
Right.
So it's gonna go that way. These bioswales they're gonna be everywhere. It's really
Yeah.
cool. Good
Right,
stuff.
but the asphalt is still the asphalt, and how much gets built,
Yeah.
somebody
I've got
looking
a
at
project
this.
right now, and they just changed, the hearing examiner said, you have to use permeable pavement. And it's gonna be really expensive, but they said, you gotta use it, that's the code, that's what
Yeah,
they're doing. So-
Expensive upfront cost, but it saves
Yeah.
you money down the road, and, it's,
Right, but I've spent a lot of time in Maple Valley, and I've seen the new construction, not a lot of green. So it's important what you're saying, but it's also important to start with a vision that is green enough, or not enough, should be more, so that when the developers see it brought to the market, those are the standards. Why wouldn't you do that? It's city-owned property.
Right.
It's a very unique opportunity, I've said that 100 times.
Yeah, it's gonna be a cool start, because what you guys came up with, whoever did all the passive rec that's gonna happen is gonna be, that part, if that stays true, that'll be a huge amenity. All those trees remaining in the southeast corner.
Yeah, I think our
Really cool.
last June's 5 different flavors, they're all at or above the minimum green standards you would want.
Is that it?
Okay, so I just want to thank the city of Maple Valley and Matt and Betsy and Laura and council people for this great opportunity. We wish you the best of luck. This is not an easy project. We are always at the University of Washington. You can find us in the phone book. We'd love to help out in any way. The great thing about us is we always have new students coming every quarter, so next time you need something, we're as good as anybody, I think. And we're much cheaper, obviously. But we really loved working here. You were the best client I've ever had in the 12 years I've been doing this. And I want to thank you, Matt, in particular, for his service to you as a planning director. He's just fantastic to work with. So thank you.
Well, all the
Thank
kids
you,
should
Dave.
get an A.
Right, so if Councilmember Johnson says it, that I heard.
All right, Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Christmas.
So Grace will make the edits to this and get this to Matt, and Matt can distribute the PowerPoint.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, David.
very much.
Good job,
Thanks again.
guys.
Yeah.